Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be here for this talk on the seven ray psychology and initiations, essentially exploring Djwahl Kuhl's teachings in the 21st century. So we've got quite a lot to get through during this presentation, and if any point you have got some burning questions, as you may do, about certain subjects, then please feel free to either come off mute and ask me a question about something, and what I do request, if there are any questions, that we keep it very on point, because I have a tendency to stir up massive debates and discussions. When I used to go, as I discovered in the early days when I did a few talks at the Cardiff Theosophical Society, when I bring up a subject, it tends to people like to talk about it for 20 minutes, and everybody likes to say what they've passionately got to say about it. And while that's all great, and I love those kind of conversations, we've obviously got plenty to cover this evening that's going to take up all of the time. So just a quick bit about me. So I live in Cardiff. I'm 41 years old, and I've been really immersed in the arcane teachings and the work of Alice Bailey primarily for about the last 15 years. So I was very blessed to have been introduced to this in my late 20s and had a good dose of this work from quite an early point in my life. And a few years later, I started hosting events for other teachers of these subjects, such as the seven rays and esoteric astrology and theosophy and things like that, to come to Cardiff and start really teaching the communities locally about this material. And I know that Verity, who's already spoken on the call today, she used to be one of the assistants. So she used to volunteer and come along and check everybody into the workshops each time that we used to hold them, and really support the growth of it with us, didn't you, Verity?
I just take myself off mute. Yeah, I did, and that was my first inauguration into it. And I've got to admit, guys, I've not stepped back into it. This would be my first time rejoining this theme since, 15 years ago? So yeah,
it's probably about 12, 13 years, I think, actually, since that kind of stuff since that kind of stuff went on. So and I know Gareth, who is going to be joining us to talk a bit and share about his experience with this new material. He will be sharing a bit about his journey. I know you've got a lot of experience. Actually, you go back longer than I do with this work, so it'll be great to hear from you throughout the presentation. Okay, so that's enough about me. So I think we've got pretty much acquainted where everybody is from. I think we did see that Dan Willer's also joined us. Dan? Okay, he may be on mute. That's okay. We'll find out from Dan later. Okay, cool. So that slide working okay? It's gone to the next one. Perfect. Okay, so the agenda, really, I've done the introduction, a brief history of this work, which we're going to cover. Who is Klaire D Roy? Because the original email that I sent out was really targeted at students who are perhaps cultured within this material, to introduce them to what I am proposing and exploring are the latest teachings of the Tibetan Master Djwahl Kuhl. But we will go and have a brief overview of that, okay? We're also going to look at actual extracts from the Circle of Initiates material, which is the primary volume of writings of the teacher and author Klaire D Roy. We're going to go a bit deeper into that. And then at the end, we can send out the recording as well, because quite a few people have asked for that. So why did I create this event? So, over the last 15 years, the seven rays have been a subject which I've really fallen in love with at many levels. And, it's one of those subjects where I start to think and see the world through a certain lens, which has been the lens of the seven rays. Not all the time, but it's like one of those set of glasses that I put on quite frequently with how I view things, and I learn about human existence and life itself, really. And in the second lockdown, January 2021, I had this intuition to teach the rays. and to produce some material around it. So I can't remember how, but I came across Klaire D Roy doing a talk on Gaia TV, that subscription service, right, with all those different videos and movies and everything on that massive compilation, right? And she did a half-an-hour presentation on there, and I was like, whoa, there's something really, really authentic about this, okay? And then a couple of days later, Gareth and Emma, Gareth who's on this call, and his wife Emma contacted me, and they said, we'd love you to teach a course with Gareth on the 7 rays and the masters. Would you be up for that? And I was like, oh my God, I've got to come over to your house. I've had this, you know, come across this new teacher. And I was hooked. As soon as Circle of Initiates turned up in the post, which is a massive monumentous book, it's huge, I couldn't put it down, right? And I would be falling to sleep at night, and I'd be like, literally, I know, no exaggeration, the book would hit my face, and I'd have to wake up and start reading it again because I couldn't get enough of it. So, you know, after having studied the arcane teachings with many organizations, you know, I went around, you know, I've been influenced by the Lucis Trust, by the Moria Federation, by Douglas Baker's materials, by lots of other teachers who are very pertinent and prominent within this field. And, you know, which has really given me a basis for seeing that they're really all teaching the same stuff. There's very, very little difference in what they're doing. If it's grounded in Alice Bailey and Djwahl Kuhl's material through Alice Bailey, it's the same stuff. And from there on, I decided that this was the book that I wanted to use for the basis of the teachings. Okay, so one of the questions that I've been, you know, really putting out there and proposing, I guess, is, are these teachings authentic DK material? And we're going to be looking at that in some depth this evening, because there's a lot of people out there who are claiming to channel this and that, and it has created some confusion and as to what really might be going on. And we're going to attempt to answer that question in some detail, okay? And, you know, why might that be happening? And then what is the value and purpose of this work, which ultimately is to provide a practical basis more than anything else for people to understand the 7 rays and what it's really about, okay? So, all right. So Tibetan Master Djwahl Kuhl here, very senior master within Earth's evolutionary scheme, as we might call it in theosophy. Very humble, and, you know, doesn't like apparently to be, he doesn't like people to treat him as a guru, or, you know, like to worship him or to put him on a pedestal or to flatter him. And that's something that is quite funny that we'll be exploring from some of the writings later on. So he's the source of this work. So in the late 19th century, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine were published by the extraordinary Helena Blavatsky, who, as Andrew could tell you, is really the source of much of what is now the Theosophical Society and has been for over a century. And, you know, she said that she was working with this Brotherhood of Masters who were giving her much of the information that was contained within the Secret Doctrine itself, as not just an attempt, but as the time had come to really start releasing these teachings to the world without, you know, what could have happened in the ancient times as being persecuted and known as a heretic. And, you know, the time had come where it was becoming safe to start putting the hidden knowledge out into the world again. And Helena Blavatsky was absolutely chosen as the person to do that. As the masters said, there was nobody better on the planet at the time to do it than her. And she's actually featured in the book, The Circle of Initiates, as well. And then decades after that, starting in about 1920, Alice Bailey was contacted by the Master Djwahl Kuhl, and she wrote with him in a telepathic link for decades. I think she passed over in the 50s, and she wrote 24 books And I think over 20 of those were directly under his authorship. And, she is the source of esoteric astrology and the seven rays. Now, I nearly put a question mark over Klaire D Roy's face, which would have been a bit rude. And because, it's such a big deal for so many people who are particularly familiar with Alice Bailey and Blavatsky's work, that, to actually be claiming or to be even exploring that another author out there today is working in the same capacities as these two teachers is quite a statement to make, right? But I can tell you, in my opinion, of a student of 15 years and somebody who's deeply passionate about these works, I vouch for the authenticity of the material, and I very proudly place her alongside Alice Bailey and Blavatsky, and that's why this event has been organised this evening. Okay, and I've never met her. She works very much behind the scenes. The website that her and her husband have for, they live near Montreal, and you can't even access their website outside of Canada. They're very inclusive to developing Canada for some reason. And, it really is that she just puts the work out into the world, and whoever wants to receive that and pick that up, it's down to them. Okay, so this is a beautiful painting here by Hilma af Klint, who said that some higher beings were working through her and the paintbrush just painted. Everything which exists on our planet is constituted by, at some level, the energies of the seven rays. Therefore, our self-expression, unique ways of being, life path, and even our personal interests and struggles are influenced and conditioned by these seven life-giving energies. All of our bodies, and here we can refer to the physical body, the emotional and or the astral bodies, the lower and the higher mental bodies or vehicles, the soul and the higher self are interwoven with these seven rays. Alice Bailey gave us in some depth the basis of this esoteric knowledge. Okay? Why? So why this information? Well, we need to know what we're made up of, if this is true, and where we are at on our path can be assisted and even clarified to some degree by the whole brilliant subject of initiations, which is a primary teaching within Klaire D Roy's works. Okay, so I'm just going to start with some opening commentaries from Alice Bailey's work, so we can look at some of the similarities between what she has to say and what Klaire D Roy has to say. Okay, I'm just going to turn something off here. Okay. So suffice it to say that I am a Tibetan disciple. Let me see, can you all see that? Yeah, suffice it to say that I am a Tibetan disciple of a certain degree, and this tells you but little. For all our disciples, from the humblest aspirant up to and beyond the Christ himself. I live in a physical body, like other men, on the borders of Tibet, and at times, from the exoteric standpoint, preside over a large group of Tibetan lamas when my other duties permit. It is this fact that has caused it to be reported that I am an abbot of this particular lamassery. I think that's how you say it. Those associated with me in the work of the hierarchy, and all true disciples are associated in this work, know me by still another name and office. Alice A. Bailey knows who I am and recognizes me by two of my names. I am a brother of yours who has traveled a little longer upon the path than has the average student, and has therefore incurred greater responsibilities. I am one who has wrestled and fought his way into a greater measure of light than has the aspirant who will read this article, and I must therefore act as a transmitter of the light, no matter what the cost. I am not an old man, as age counts among the teachers, yet I am not young or inexperienced. My work is to teach and spread the knowledge of the ageless wisdom wherever I can find a response, and I have been doing this for many years. I seek also to help the Master Moria and the Master Kuthumi whenever opportunity offers, for I have long been connected with them and with their work. In all the above, I have told you much, yet at the same time I have told you nothing, which would lead you to offer me that blind obedience and the foolish devotion which the emotional aspirant offers to the guru and master whom he is yet unable to contact. Nor will he make that desired contact until he has transmuted emotional devotion into unselfish service to humanity, not to the master. The books that I have written are sent out with no claim for their acceptance. They may or may not be correct, true and useful. It is for you to ascertain their truth by right practice and by the exercise of the intuition. Neither I nor Alice Bailey is the least interested in having them be acclaimed as inspired writings or in having anyone speak of them with bated breath as being the work of one of the masters. If they present truth in such a way that it follows sequentially upon that already offered in the world teachings, if the information given raises the aspiration, the will to serve from the plane of the emotions to that of the mind, the plane whereon the masters can be found, then they will have served their purpose. If the teaching conveyed calls forth a response from the illumined mind of the worker in the world and brings a flashing forth of his intuition, then let that teaching be accepted, but not otherwise. If the statements meet with eventual corroboration or are deemed true under the test of the law of correspondences, then that is well and good. But should this not be so, let not the student accept what is said. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with that. That's a great, passage to overview as the basis of DK starting to give out these teachings, and that was, in a published material in 1934. Okay, so this is Klaire D Roy's prologue. Okay. Suffice it for you to know that I am a Tibetan of origin and that my teachings aim to be more occult than mystical, since my work consists of awakening mankind so that he may become the bearer of his divine aspect. Mankind is not meant to live in ignorance. He is meant to become a conscious light, evolving within the cosmic plan of our planet. My task, therefore, consists in transmitting to mankind the teachings that will allow him to become a free being, conscious of who he is and what he is being called upon to become. Who is the Master Djwahl Kuhl? Let's jump straight in. The science of the seven rays was introduced at the beginning of the 20th century by the Tibetan Master Djwahl Kuhl. Working jointly with Alice Bailey, he wrote through her several volumes on the topic. A treatise on the seven rays composed of 5 volumes is one of the main pieces. Very discreet, this master who presently lives in Tibet in a physical body in spite of his very old age, he would be over 300 years, is the abbot of a monastery situated in the northeast of Tibet. Djwahl Kuhl, whose real name remains a secret in order to protect his identity and his life, works in harmony with the Great White Brotherhood who watch over our evolution on Earth. My husband and I had the chance to briefly meet him twice in Tibet. At his request, we kept silent about our interactions with him. However, please note that we work in close cooperation with him, that we are his disciples, and that I have assumed at his request the work started by Alice A. Bailey and Helena P. Blavatsky. I serve him to the best of my ability and knowledge. The book, The Circle of Initiates, is therefore his work and not mine. Okay, so she's saying here that he's over 300 years old, right? Now, when I first got on my spiritual path, one of my early teachers, who was a teacher of teachers, who worked very much behind the scenes, got very little information from books. A lot of it was channeled from other levels. He said there are perhaps 8 to 10 masters working behind the scenes who have been in bodies for centuries, and they can pretty much relocate anywhere over the planet they want to, and they're not exoteric, they're not out in the public, and there's a handful of them on this planet. And there are stories in the Bible and various Hindu traditions, and likewise, that do talk about people, foregoing the aging process. And DK does talk in these new materials very briefly about how that is possible. Okay. All right. So some similarities there, I think, in the context and the style of Alice Bailey's work. Now, she's also said that she's met him twice in Tibet. And, when I was talking to some old students who have been around Alice Bailey's work for decades, I think it went in one ear and came straight out the other, because I think even for old students, that is a very difficult thing to accept, for people to begin to even open up to the possibility that the third teachings, which were promised around the early part of the 21st century, are potentially here, and that there's a teacher here claiming that she's met with DK twice in Tibet. That's quite a big thing to say. Quite a big thing to say. And it's not really what's important, okay? But it's great that she's let us know that. And she's either telling the truth or she isn't. And I don't think that the caliber and the integrity of this work is coming from a place with a person that doesn't have integrity, okay? So, major works by Klaire D Roy. Circle of Initiates took over 5 years to complete, and it is essentially 109 past and present world figures. So people who were quite known figures from human history, and also quite known and public figures who are still alive in the world right now. DK does a ray analysis of them. So looking at the 7 rays, and we'll be going into that, and the initiation levels, which we'll be going into too. And here is a quotation. So in this book, I am bringing to light both the accurate initiatory level as well as the ray structure of known contemporary personalities in order to encourage a better understanding of their influence or effect upon the aggregate energy of the planet. So when I first read this, the first thought that I had was, oh my God, is this an invasion into privacy? Like looking at somebody in that detail. And somebody who I offered to come to this talk, who isn't here, didn't believe that a master would actually go into that level of depth around a human being that's still alive today. But really, it is an absolutely brilliant way of actually understanding the rays, because he says here to encourage a better understanding of their influence or effect upon the aggregate energy of the planet, right? Because we all know that influential public people do affect human conscissness. Musicians affect human consciousness. Did Michael Jackson affect human consciousness? Does Celine Dion have some influence? Do the movie producers affect humanity? Do the religious leaders affect humanity? Of course they do. Of course they do, in different ways for different people. Some do for some don't for others. But it's the purpose is not to be invasive or to undermine people or to create comparison. It's to encourage a better understanding of their influence or effect upon the aggregate energy of the planet. Okay, so we can see the rays and initiation and some commentaries off Djwahl Kuhl in the light of that context. Okay, so what is an initiation level? Okay, so you hear these days you have initiation into Reiki, which is probably one of the most popular things, and you get initiations within magic circles, and I think even Masonry does initiation and things like that as well. I'm not going to comment much about those things I've just mentioned. What I will say is this, is that we evolve through 7 major gates, each gate having 10 sub-levels. This takes place very slowly over hundreds of incarnations. It can and does take lifetimes to even reach the first initiation, also known as the first degree. And it can take incarnations to even reach a new decimal point. So it's 10 decimal points. Well, it's 10 decimal points up to 1, 10 decimal points, 10 decimal points, 3 10 decimal points, and so on. So it's like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. And that is the context that we're given the initiation levels within this book. The bulk of humanity is actually not even the first initiation. One of the 10 sub-levels before the first initiation, somewhere around there, probably close to the first initiation. Different countries on the whole have different levels, different communities. You know, I think the UK is probably quite right up there, generally speaking, even though you might not think it at times. But, you know, depends where you come from, what's going on in the country, what they have access to, and what their values are and how they behave and things like that. So most people who were overviewed in the circle of initiates are first degree initiates. They're at that first level. There's quite a volume of second degree initiates as well. A handful of third degree initiates. There's about 3 or 4 people max who are fourth degree initiates. None in this book are 5th degree initiates. There is one person overviewed at the 6th degree, and there is one person overviewed at the 7th degree. Okay, so, you know, even those who are evolving and working with human society and have a positive influence are often only 2nd level initiates, and we'll be going into that. Here's an extract from the book, The New Tantrism. Japan, the country, is a young one in terms of initiation, even if it isn't so in terms of its existence, because it's an old country, right? The average in terms of initiation is about 0.9 to 1 level of initiation. These are young souls hungry for all kinds of experiences. The repercussions of the atomic bomb made them grow at many levels. Okay, gives you an idea. Japan coming up to the first initiation. After a comprehensive reading of this book, it is my earnest wish that you look upon yourself and your life in a fresh way, most especially regarding the esoteric subject of initiations, which most people in the past have consistently misinterpreted to their own personally biased advantage. The process of initiation can now be correctly gauged and interpreted in the interest of the greater well-being and the evolutionary benefit of every sentient being. Now, one can only imagine if an ego likes to think it's at a certain level, right? And starts to think, oh, I might be this and I might be that, and, you know, and I'm doing this, so I must be this level, and I've done this initiation that, you know, with my healing, so I must be a master. You know, it's like he's saying that, which most people in the past have consistently misinterpreted. They don't understand it properly, to their own personally biased advantage. Okay, and I can relate to that from time to time, you know, thinking, you know, the human ego is still very much in there, and one would like to think one is at this level and so forth, and that has been, seems to be something that's been quite apparent among people even studying this through Alice Bailey's work. Okay, so one of the hot topics that I was putting out for the basis of this talk is really cutting straight to it. A lot of people out there claiming to be working with the masters. Are they doing that? And we're going to explore that in some depth. I can find at least 5 published authors claiming to be working with DK. Okay. New movements that have come about, you know, started maybe 1958 with Mark L. Prophet and Elizabeth Clare Prophet claiming to be working with the masters. Most of the Ascended Master materials does emanate from their organization, the Summit Lighthouse. They were really the ones that introduced the whole channeling work and the Ascended Masters to the world. And, you know, I think the bulk of what we regard as the Ascended Masters originates from them. Now, the interesting thing is, if you go to Alice Bailey's work and to Blavatsky's work, you never hear the word Ascended Master. Okay? You only hear the word master. You never hear ascended. They were the ones who introduced the word ascended. And it's not wrong that the word ascended master might be used, but it's just important to observe that word for the time being, okay? People in groups all over the world claim to go into a trance state and be working with Master DK. And, you know, there's a lot of information going on around that does create confusion, okay? Now, for me personally, I never really took to their teachings. I could never read very much of it. If I read Alice Bailey's work, I can literally read 3, 4, 5 pages and take 2 hours to read it and really sleep with the teachings on my pillow. And the same with Klaire D Roy's work. There's a whole world of what I've experienced working with their works. And you could say that's just because you resonate with it, which I get. But I never personally took to any of these teachings that were claiming to teach about the masters and the 7 rays in the way that they actually were, okay? So here's an extract from Circle of Initiates, which some of you may have read on a document that I did send out to quite a few people with the invite to this event, and I'm going to generate that. Elizabeth Clare Prophet has accomplished a lot by making certain information concerning the masters accessible. She worked to make them known without realizing she was communicating with an astral reflection of these masters. Because she demonstrated sincerity in her work, the average citizen came to realize that authentic masters existed and still exist. Regarding her teaching, we can affirm that 20% of her work is truthful, and the rest being emanations of the astral potential of these masters. We do not want to discredit this woman, but simply re-establish the facts. Not being very evolved, she accomplished a lot with a love for humanity that seemed sincere most of the time. Okay, so he's pointing out that she's working with an astral reflection of the masters and that 20% of her teaching is truthful. What does that mean? We'll be going into it. Mark Prophet, like his wife, allowed the whole world to know of the existence of masters. However, we must mention that he was less evolved than his wife was, and the majority of his writing was fictitious. His source of inspiration came from the lower astral and did not go beyond the 3rd level. He therefore knew how to enter into communication with almost perfect astral reflections of the masters. He is not a master and will not be one for several incarnations. He is carrying the responsibility of a heavy karma because the abuses perpetrated within his group stem from his energy. When he created the group, he inspired it with an astral energy that polluted part of the mission of this movement. By encouraging his wife to assist him and by deliberately leaving her his succession, he committed an error he will have to pay for during his next incarnations. The founding principles of this movement was acceptable, but the personal abuses that were perpetrated impose individual restitution towards the people affected. The ease with which his wife entered into communication with the masters made him aware that she was more evolved than he, and unfortunately, he failed to direct her correctly. His initiation level is 1.4. and hers is 1.5. Okay. And, you know, in Circle of Initiates, it gives the race structure and an interpretation of all of that. Okay. Which we won't go into with these 2 people. When I read this 2 to 3 years ago, I felt a massive relief and release of energy because I couldn't quite work out what was going on. Why with this work it was resonant and this wasn't. And Elizabeth Clare Prophet stuff is saying that different masters are now accountable for different ray types, and you know the rays and the colors of the rays don't match up to what Alice Bailey said, and some of the names of them are different and things like that. And it created quite a lot of confusion, really. For me personally, and you know, as somebody who was about to teach the 7 rays, it was just honestly, I had this release on 2 occasions where I just was like, oh. I was so relieved that I actually got clear about what was actually the source of that misunderstanding. Okay, Most of what you will see here and be exposed to via ascended master channelings and artwork and card decks can be traced back to these teachers. Okay, so here's some pictures of the masters, and which may very well be paintings and images drawn through what people are psychically seeing or channeling from the astral planes. Okay, so a little on the astral worlds. The astral worlds, there are 7 levels, so we are told. The astral planes are absolutely gigantic. When my grandmother passed over to spirit 13 years ago, who I'm still occasionally in communication with, I asked her, you know, what's it like on the other side? She says it's endless. It goes on and on and on. It's massive. The astral planes are huge. And I was just recently, about 6 months ago, listening to a recording of a book called Life in the Unseen Worlds by Anthony Borgia, and I highly recommend it. And it's a very simple explanation of life on the other side when people pass over to spirit, written in 1954. Really, really enjoyable stuff. And he says the same thing. It is massive on the astral planes. Massive, right? So plenty of room to do plenty of things, okay? The astral planes are highly impressionable. Spirits and souls and humans create on astral planes with the power of thought and intention. You can collapse objects and make objects with projected thought energy over time. So, you know, the planes of energy are highly, highly responsive to intention and to projected energy. This is really important to understand because this is part of the basis for how this works. The 7 levels each correspond to lower and higher vibrations. So you move from the first astral plane, you know, is very related to the difficulties and the darkness and the shallow existence of living on Earth. And the 7th level, you know, corresponds to various heavenly planes and things like that, where you can find higher energies and higher beings, okay? I will point out, did some of the people who were doing this work, as in Elizabeth and Mark Clare Prophet, they didn't know that they were actually working with what this material says was astral masters. You know, it does differ, like I've said, in quality and content quite a bit from Alice Bailey's work. And yeah, I've talked about, you know, how personally I felt that it doesn't hold the same magnetism as Alice Bailey's work, okay? I was talking to Gareth's wife, Emma Blake Jones, about a year ago about this, and she said, you know, if there are astral reflections of the masters showing up on astral planes, why is this happening? Why? What is going on? Why is it happening, right? So I'm just going to jump forward a bit and come back to that page in a second. So I don't know if anybody here has ever read or heard of Dan Millman and the Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Verity's nodding ahead. Yeah, anybody else heard of it? You can put your thumb up, maybe, yes, or your hand. Yeah, it's a great book, right? Dan really influenced me on my spiritual journey, where I learned a lot from him, from numerology. You know, he taught a great numerological system, which I still remember today, and I still use it from time to time. And you know, and likewise with Neil Donald Walsh. So I'm just gonna read something to get across a point here, okay? I'm going to jump. It says Master Djwahl Kuhl's commentary, and I'm going to jump to a certain paragraph. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So, you know, the way the Peaceful Warrior is, from what I remember, based upon, you know, Dan Millman's novel fiction story of how he grows and becomes more of himself because of this fictional character called Socrates, who guides him around, you know, his development both inwardly and outwardly in the world. And it helps him to become who he is at lots of levels, okay? So his master Socrates is an astral projection of his wishes, is an amalgam of personalities he has met and used to create his character. Socrates now exists on the astral plane. Dan Millman's readers who believed in his existence have acted in such a way that Socrates enjoys a certain astral atomic texture, a medium for the emanation of the accumulation of thoughts projected on an image totally fabricated by Dan Millman. Okay, so what it's saying is that all the readers of the books, intensely thinking about this fictional Socrates, have projected with so much energy and thought and spirituality and emotional and the unconscious and the conscious and whatever level of our being, have projected a lot of energy, because his book has sold like 25 million copies out there into existence, and on the astral plane has manifested a being that reflects Socrates. And he's saying his character Socrates now exists on the astral plane. Dan Millman's readers who believed in his existence have acted in such a way that Socrates enjoys a certain astral atomic texture, a medium for the emanation of his accumulation of thoughts projected on an image totally fabricated by Dan Millman. It's not an invalidation, it's just what he is stating is, I would go as far as saying, is a fact. Okay, and I think it's a great teaching to understand this, right? Is this beginning to make sense? Hands up if you're following this and this is kind of landing for people. Yeah, okay, we got some hands. Lisa Thomas has raised a hand. Okay, Dan Wool has raised his hand. Okay, cool. Okay, so it's starting to come across. Okay, so let's jump back then to these teachings here on the masters. So it's quite probable, in my opinion, interpretation, that on the astral planes, Yoda exists. Harry Potter exists. Darth Vader might even exist. And even Freddy Krueger might even exist, right? All those nightmares and of people watching Nightmare on Elm Street in the 80s might have created a version of Freddy Krueger. And this is something we have to take seriously, is that all this energy we're projecting through our experience, creating entities on different planes that actually have some kind of atomic, because the atom actually holds consciousness. That's what the atom is. Atomic texture where life and being can exist on different planes. Okay? So the masters, very enormously powerful, right? On very high planes beyond the astral. And their energy is coming down into Earth. And it's so powerful that it's leaving imprints of their energy on the various astral levels. Okay? And this seems to be how these masters are actually, some of the masters that people seem to be coming into contact with are actually astral reflections. Now, I had a conversation with Lisa Thomas, who just put her hand up a few days ago, and it really, it was a great conversation, a discussion that helped me even deepen my understanding of this, because, or what I perceive is my understanding, because this really is just my take on it, right? Everything I say here tonight is just my take on it. And, from the research that I've done, I believe that most of humanity are not ready to work with the masters at the level they exist. Their energy is way outside of human, for the most part, way outside of human consciousness. And they generally, in my opinion, do not work with masses of people. I'm not to say that they don't come in, that they don't work with people, that they're not there when you call upon them. They could very well be there. It's not for me to say how they do and don't interact, but it's my opinion that they don't work in the way that some people might think that they do. And, humanity is just taking baby steps on the spiritual path. And it seems like there's quite a dissonance between where the average human consciousness is that's stepping on the path and where the masters are in their higher planes. And in between exists apparently the astral planes. And it could seem to be that these astral reflections may be intermediaries. right? So even though they're not like 100% giving out the same information as the masters would directly, because their energy and consciousness only reflects the vibration and awareness of the astral plane that they exist on, right? Which goes from low to high based on 1 to 7. You know, he says here that Markel's prophet connection with the astral masters did not go beyond the 3rd astral level. That's not particularly very high, actually. Do they go to the 4th and 5th and 6th levels? Maybe they do. I don't actually know the answer to that question, but it seems to be that there's actually more than one version of DK on the various astral planes. So you could actually connect with a version of DK on the 3rd astral plane, and you might be able to connect with the version of him on the 5th astral plane, right? It seems to be that this is what's going on in the Ascended Master world. And when I connect to certain teachings that claim to be working with DK, I can feel that astral energy coming in. And I'm telling you the truth. I'm very sensitive. I'm a rising Cancer in astrology, which is very sensitive energy. I am not the most grounded person you will meet, far from it. But I have got an aptitude to pick up on energies. And I can tell you that there are astral energies that come in. Sometimes they're quite fiery, actually. Sometimes they're quite powerful, actually. It doesn't mean to say that these beings aren't doing some good work and aren't putting energy into the world and aren't occurring and looking like the masters, right? If we go back to Elizabeth Clare Prophet's section, oh god, that's the wrong way, sorry. Let's have a look. She worked to make them known without realizing that she was communicating with an astral reflection of these masters. It does go on to say in the commentary about her, perfect astral reflections. And that's a really important point to make. An amalgamation of energy that constitutes an astral master or being could look almost identical to the real thing. Right? So he does go on to say this, that, you know, the perfect astral reflection. And, you know, and it does occur that it's happening for a reason, because at some level, it may be assisting to bridge an unevolved humanity into the energy of the masters. And it doesn't mean to say that the energy that they're bringing through doesn't have some potency to it, because I think it does. I've experienced, you know, some channelings on YouTube that people do, and even though I don't like the knowledge that comes through, because I'm a, you know, the knowledge and the esoteric knowledge is my thing, it's my area, the energy that comes through is quite fiery and quite strong. So they are bringing through some potency and some power, but it's a distorted energy to some degree, and the knowledge aspect of it tends not to be at the same level of caliber or even all the time accurate. And it's really important to bear that in mind or consider it. Okay. So what else have we got here?
Chris?
Yeah, go on.
Can I just add an observation?
Yes, go for it.
Talking there. We all know that things are created on the astral levels. You know, the elementals work there to create these things. Energy follows thought. And they create that stuff with the energies. What if, just as with the 7 rays come down through the various planets so that we are able to handle the energies? What if the masters work on those several layers, astral layers, in order to power down, sort of thing? And that depending on your level of initiation, you work with that level of astral master. So it is a copy of DK or El Moya or whoever it is, but maybe just a lower aspect of them.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Thank you, Gareth. Anything else about
that? No.
Okay, join in. You can join in anytime. Gareth and I do teach courses together, and I have asked him to come in and, you know, join in where he can contribute. Okay. Is there anything else anybody has specifically around that topic? Any questions or an observation?
I have a question, Chris.
Okay, go for it.
I'm just trying to get my head around it all. So if our thoughts are what creates these beings on the astral plane, and there's lots of different versions on them at different levels, does that mean that there's more than one version at each level? Like, for example, my opinion, that is important as well, right? I guess with the energy.
Absolutely.
So my opinion of, I'm going to use Harry Potter because you said that earlier, going to be different to Sarah's opinion of Harry Potter. So, or like, do you know what I mean? Everybody has such different opinions and emotions around different figures. So I just wondered if you could maybe talk about that quickly.
Yeah, I don't actually know the answer to that question. I think, there is a projection that's taking place, as he talks about with Dan Milliman and Socrates. And there was also what Gareth said and what I said about the energy of the masters, leaving their energy on those planes and creating force. And it could be that if you go to the fourth astral level and were to communicate with that master there of, let's say, Kuthumi, it could be a reflection of Kuthumi's energy at the vibrational level on average that the fourth astral plane resonates to, as well as a projection of thought and energy that's relevant to that astral plane as well.
Okay.
That would be my assumption.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's what we're being given hints at. Yeah. Thank you, Beth. Does that help?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else about that subject? Okay. And go on. Is somebody going to say something?
I was just going to use the analogy of sound and how perhaps it's helpful to think of it as, my dog Dougal here can hear a sound that I can't hear. The sound is the same, but it's just operating on a different frequency. So, it may be that I would hear part of the noise and the dog would hear a fuller part of the noise, and then a bat would hear another part of the same noise, and yet the origins of it are identical. So in my mind, that's how I sort of see it. So if you like, there's one DK, but some of us can only hear the lower frequency, and some of us may be lucky enough to hear the higher frequency.
Wow.
I don't know if that's a helpful analogy.
That is going to give me a lot to think about. Personally,
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Well, we're squeezing some gold out of everybody now. Has anybody got any gold they can add to that topic? Lisa is waving her hand. You added a lot of good stuff for me a couple of days ago, Lisa. It really helped me to understand that this is not something that needs to be avoided, but it is a part of the system we're currently evolving with, potentially for a number of different reasons. And it could overall be helping, actually, even though it does distort some things. Okay. So, taking it a bit more complicated, we all gain karma through action. Karma essentially means action. What we act upon and what we do, there is obviously an equal and opposite reaction. Karma is a massive subject to understand in some ways. I love it. I'm learning more about it all the time. But what I will say is this, is that what we give out, we are bound to, and we work through in our evolution specifically. So it's almost as if negative karma carries us into a much deeper process of evolution over future years and future lifetimes of experience. So Elizabeth Clare Prophet, for example, did an enormous amount of work, essentially reaching tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people through her works. And only 20% of her work, he's saying here, is correct. Right? If only, that would mean that there is some kind of karma, there's some kind of repercussion connected to doing the work, right? So over a number of lifetimes, she will, in my opinion, grow and come closer in each incarnation to working with the masters at their source and carrying the karma of having misrepresented some of their work to a large number of people, will have to then not undo the karma or redeem it, but in a sense redeem it by doing progressively more authentic work with the masters. So she is karmically linked into working with the masters. That for me would be a fact. And she is going to be bound to having to do more representative work with them in future incarnations, which will lead her over 2 or 10 or 20 incarnations into the ashrams of the masters, doing the highest consciousness of work with them directly, because karma binds us in very interesting ways to our evolutionary path. It's like within the darkness is a disguised blessing of evolution because of the damage and the distortion that we do in whatever way we do it in the world. We are bound to then or integrally and authentically having to represent those things, situations and subjects or areas of existence in an authentic way over time. That is, as I understand it, an example of how the law of karma is at the center of our evolution. So, you know, you could say that a distorted representation of the master's work through only working with astral reflections and actually to a sense deceiving people around what they were working with, not that she did that intentionally, her soul will really be set up to do very deep restorative work over future lifetimes where she will embody progressively their actual work. Okay, so it's almost like the negative karma deepens a process of realization in the world of the master's work, because if she'd never done this work and she'd never misrepresented them, and let's say in 7 lifetimes time she was authentically representing them very powerfully so in their truth and authenticity, she would never be doing that in 7 lifetimes if she hadn't created the mess and the misrepresentation in the first place. So the dark and negative karma has hidden there's a lot of gold in it actually within the darkness that ultimately helps to create authentic work in existence. So that is a big subject to go into. It's one of my favorite subjects, but I think she's no different. So it's not that it's wrong, nothing is wrong. And I think the moment we start to invalidate things, that's when the disempowerment comes in. Looking at things authentically and cleanly is very important, and to question things is very important, but as little invalidation as possible. Nobody's wrong. There is no right or wrong. It's all made up. And it sometimes serves as a checking mechanism that are we taking progressively correct action? But, the laws of evolution will take care of that. And I think we don't want to be disempowering ourselves through thinking that something is wrong. Okay. So it's not wrong. It just is what it is. Okay. So Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. Wave your hand if you've heard of Neale Donald Walsch, The Conversations with God.
Read them all.
Aren't they great books?
Amazing.
Absolutely awesome books. Yeah. So there is an overview on here on Neale Donald Walsch. It's a very encouraging overview as well that he gives. And we're going to look at a few bits on that from the Circle of Initiates. So let's have a look what he says. So Mr. Walsch is a channel, a medium of similar caliber as Edgar Cayce. He does not really converse with God, but with an astral reflection of what we may call God. He accomplishes really good work because he gives hope and guidelines to humanity, or at least to those who accept putting their trust in him by reading his books. God is inaccessible, but Mr. Walsch allows a certain understanding, thanks to his writings, of the divine nature of man when he embarks on the evolutionary path up until the 3rd initiation. The entity that dictates the messages originates from one of the higher astral planes and fluctuates between the 5th and 6th level. He slightly colors the messages received. However, we may mention that he is doing good work and he will continue to do so as long as his ego remains sufficiently humble not to intervene. Channels such as Mr. Walsh prove necessary in order to reach the mass consciousness. The great ordeal he suffered at the end of his 49 years allowed his soul to get closer in order to transmit to him the inspiration of his real work. The astral entity, whom we can call an angel, carrying messages from the higher realms, maintains a link with him that allows the transmission of information adapted to the human condition, but mainly to the evolution of the human masses. Some data are obsolete, even false, but their positive effect remains the most important link with God, with faith, and with the human soul evolving within matter. Mr. Walsh's initiation level will surprise many, because this channel allows him to receive messages beyond the capacities to capture them from this initiation level, as was the function of Edgar Cayce. Initiation level 1.3. His mental polarization is starting, but what makes him such a good channel remains his personality that does not obstruct the divine intervention within the communication. He is straddling between the divine intervention of the mental plane that is not quite ready and his soul communicating with the mental plane in order to convey to him messages coming from a high-level astral entity, for some that appears like God. Okay? So there we have it. Go up to the higher astral planes, and there are angelic forces, devas, and even astral reflections in the 6th and 5th and 7th heavens that can reflect the energy of the Creator. So that is a really, really useful passage, I think, to look at, and there's a lot of, good information in there. Now, it in no way undermines his work, I don't think. And I do want to acknowledge something about my own path, nearly 20 years ago. So in about 2005, when I was just exploring my path, Reiki and Sai Baba and crystals and the health shows, and done my Reiki 1 and starting to read the Celestine Prophecy, they all had an impact. But there was one material that shook me to the core, and it was Conversations with God. And I was about 24 years old, and I would start reading the books. And I was reading them for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And I absolutely loved book 1. I loved it to the core and back, and I still do. And I'd be in bed at night asleep, and this ringing would wake me up that was painful. It was like, not like quite like a needle being stuck in my ear, but the vibration was so strong and so high and so sharp that it was really painful and scary. And it used to be piercing and really strong. And I used to say, please stop. Please stop. This is scaring me. This is enough. Can you please stop? And I used to call out because I didn't understand what it was. And when I read that passage about that higher astral entity that reflects, that we could qualify as a divine angel that reflects the energy of the Creator in some form, I realized that was the energy that was interacting with my consciousness. So he absolutely allowed for that energy to come through and to start interacting with my coarse consciousness that wasn't beginning to become developed and spiritualized. I was at where I was at in life, right? I'd never been exposed to this stuff before. But it had a very big effect. And I think it's one of the things that really did take me out of that state of consciousness that I was in and helped me move forward. And it was very, very likely that entity that is being referred to in this material. So I think it's important, because astral doesn't mean wrong, or it doesn't mean distorted necessarily. There's a lot of source and materials that come from those levels. They're intimately linked with human evolution. They reflect human evolution. And DK says in this material that this being comes from the 5th and 6th astral heaven. So as you go higher up in the astral planes, you are reaching heavenly energies. that are capable of really bringing in the light into our existence. Okay, so they're both doing good work, and I've been very influenced by their materials on my path, as I know so many millions have been and will continue to be. So thank you both very much. Not an invalidation at all. Okay, so we're going to explore some of Klaire D Roy's materials here through the New Tantrism series. And we're going to start off with, okay, bye Jenny, we'll send you the recording. She did say that she had kids and stuff tonight. So I'm going to read out the back cover of the book, because most people, you know, associate Tantra with sex. That's how it occurs in the world. Like, you know, that's the reputation it's got. But, you know, true Tantrism to me, or its origins, creates a unity and bonding with the soul. And it can also be a unity and bonding with deity. Certainly within Tibetan Buddhism and the tantric practices of ancient India are based upon predominantly Tantra being unison with divinity, okay, versus, you know, just the sexual process with another human being. It's not that it's bad to be used for those purposes, but, you know, he does say in these materials that you can get stuck within a certain level of consciousness if you just practice it based on sex and intimacy, okay? So Tantrism must not be understood within the context of Buddhism, although Buddhism has helped to make Tantrism known. Tantrism is a separate and autonomous entity. It fluctuates according to its own rhythm and is not influenced by any factors associated with a philosophy or a religion. It is unique, as we are, but untamable and incomprehensible to the one who tries to define it as an entity that is conditional and limited to certain factors. Nothing really influences Tantrism except Tantrism itself, which evolves according to the era and the people to whom it addresses itself. It is not subject to fixed and rigid laws, but respects the one who is noble at heart and who sincerely progresses upon the path. So here's an extract, okay? And this, for me, reflects the kind of caliber that we've seen throughout DK's teachings with Alice Bailey, particularly, okay? So some of this information in here, I did not get this. Some of it I still have to slow down and read. I've read it 10 times and I probably get just over half of it, okay? So I don't want to overwhelm. I'm not saying you will be. You might not understand all of it. But what I want to do is just really demonstrate the kind of level of teaching that DK is renowned for, okay? Shambhala, oh, by the way, he does say in one of these books that there are 7 levels from which to interpret his teachings. So you may get it one way the first time you read it, and there may be 6 other levels to interpret it from, okay? Which could happen over 10 years, it could happen over 1,000 years. It depends when you're ready to get it at that level, okay? Shambhala. Shambhala is in contact with the Pleiades, and we can say that it symbolically represents the feet of the world. It is the basis of spirituality, an artificial process needed to awaken man that is diffused everywhere in the world by the means of the etheric channels that run through our planet. Shambhala guards humanity by receiving vital information regarding what the planet is experiencing. These channels run through the earthly layer, but their influence extends well beyond. With their energy, they bathe the aura of the planet up to a distance of about 25,000 kilometers. Beyond this, we find the influence of other systems connected to our own. Shambhala, an occult city in which reside several great living masters, is not yet ready to reveal its secrets because man is not sufficiently wise. It will do so in the coming generations if the existence of man will allow it. The feet also hold the secret of divine realization. since the entire plan of the process is inscribed when the ultimate realization is achieved. By ultimate realization, we mean the fifth initiation that opens the gateway to other dimensions, man being at that point in permanent contact with the monad, higher self. He is far from being perfect, but his apprenticeship is now at the monadic level via his planetary mission. He no longer has an ego that governs his life, since he is entirely at the service of the Most High and of the plan. He has realized that he was nothing more than a grain of sand in the middle of a universe where there is everything to learn and everything to do. He realizes that he is a very young initiate on the path of ultimate perfection that he will attain after having made his 9th initiation. The footprints left by an initiate who has realized that he is in fact nothing more than a monadic essence progressing towards the Kirpan or divine aspect of his destiny can help those that are less advanced than he. The aura that's left and partially picked up again by those who follow the same path will allow the conscious effort of those who authentically search for their path to find it and to become engaged with it. They will follow the footsteps and will realize that they have always been on the path without knowing it. The engagement having been made at the time of their arrival in the earthly dimension as souls coming to experiment in this solar system. Each toe represents a monadic plane. The plane of concrete knowledge linked to the monad, the plane of direct knowledge linked to the monad, the plane of infinite knowledge linked to the monad, the plane of akashic knowledge linked to the monad, the plane of infinite knowledge linked to the divine aspect governing the monad. A. The plane of concrete knowledge linked to the monad alludes to the primordial quality that instantly recognizes the concrete effect, direct and indirect, of all actions and manifestations that is governed by the monads. A superconsciousness is born, supporting the occult aspect of man who henceforth knows all. B. The plane of direct knowledge linked to the monad allows the initiate to know everything at all times in a clear and precise manner. He isn't subject to solar plexus vibrations that give a distorted view of wisdom and knowledge. He knows because this is how it is and because no astral intervention can disturb him. He is no longer mystical, but completely and entirely occult. He sees beyond everything, but not yet beyond the all. He must progress further still in order to accede to the absolute vision, allowing him to see beyond the beyond. C. The plane of infinite knowledge linked to the monad allows the initiate to have access to direct and precise knowledge concerning that which encompasses all that has existed and all that is to come in the minutest details. This allows the initiate to understand the data that allows the world of form to exist in a given space-time where everything becomes contingent on what is animated by the will of God, which is infinite. From this point on, the initiate possesses a vision of that which is infinite in its purest expression, without attachment to any kind of concepts that are already known and outdated. He remains free in this expression, which makes him an immortal being. He knows that knowledge is without limits, without constraints and obstacles, since he is no longer subject to the lower nature, which includes the soul. D. The plane of akashic knowledge linked to the monad allows the initiate to have access to all information related to the earth and to its evolution. The initiate becomes conscious of all the planes that affect human nature in its entirety. The instantaneous access to this occult library makes him constantly realize the impact of the link that unites him to the all and to everything, since all is connected and the annals of the Akashic records prove it. Not a single gesture can be made without an occult repercussion and without a material change in that which manifests. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent, all is in evolution, including the past. The initiate then can circulate in time without fear of being absorbed by it. he becomes an intemporal traveler, having access to several planes of consciousness at the same time. E, the plane of infinite knowing linked to the divine aspect which governs the monad, allows the initiate to accomplish his mission while being aware that he is the all, since he knows he is a part of the all in a conscious and unequivocal manner. Via the expression of the monad, he is divine and therefore entitled and a beneficiary. This plane is the most occult for human nature, linked to the monadic aspect of form. It cannot be understood logically nor intuitively. It can only be grasped by the spirit, which becomes responsible for it and uses it for specific ends related to human nature, that is tributary to the divine aspect of the monad, who possesses more than one aspect. Now, if you understood all of that, then you're an occult genius, because I didn't. Right? I didn't. Maybe, you know, some bits you got, some bits you didn't. But that, for me, is the kind of depth and complexity that is given out sometimes by DK in his teachings. You know, people who will have read The Secret Doctrine will be like, oh my God, you can barely read a paragraph of that stuff. You know, and you could spend like a week analyzing a paragraph. It's so deep. It's so complex, right? And Alice Bailey's work is a bit easier, but it's still very deep in places and very complex, right? And that material there has that kind of caliber and complexity to it, okay? Now, there's another page that I'm going to read because it is a follow-on from this, and it may be valuable for people, particularly for somebody who I know who this might really catch on this call, who's Emma Lawton. Okay, because she's into Tantra through Buddhism, okay? Each toe represents a divine aspect covered by the monad. The monad, by the way, is the correct occult name to describe the higher self. The monad is smaller than the atom, but it emanates more power than anything else within the human consciousness. You know, it far surpasses anything. It's the most powerful aspect of us. It's quite distant from us generally in our evolution. We're just starting to tap into its energy. And it is smaller than the atom, and it is at some level a being beyond time and space, I would assume, that is somewhat connected to the energy of the creator, okay? Each toe represents a divine aspect governed by the monad. We could have done this from the soul's point of view, but the study will have been less important. We can, however, mention that each toe is qualified by a tantric divinity that expresses an energy connected to each of the aspects characterizing the physical life of man. These divinities are the yidams, who awaken once the individual is put into contact with the awakening of his potential. We can say that each yidam dances on one toe when the consciousness of the individual alights and attunes to the yidam that he has called upon. There is the possibility of awakening 10 yidams, since there are 10 toes. The most powerful ones are found on the big toes. We discover Avalokiteshvara, left foot, and Manjushri, the right foot. Next to them are Yama and Yamantaka, who in turn have their neighbors, the green Tara and the white Tara. Next, we find Amagosiddhi and Samantabhadra, and to conclude by those who are the easiest to awaken, that is to say the divinities Haruka and his companion Vajra Yogini. Each yidam represents a quality that must be awakened by the person who meditates in order to accede to a more elevated aspect of his consciousness. When the 10 yidams are active, the soul is propulsed out of the subtle body that has been keeping it a prisoner and is now ready to be absorbed by the monad, who is now one with the soul. The yidams are dissolved and return to their original source, which is a part of the mystical aspect of the lowest occult plane, whatever that means. We know that the occult embodies the mystic and finishes by digesting it completely, rendering these divinities useless for higher evolution. When all occult work is terminated, mysticism will disappear, taking with it in its wake the Buddhist divinities that are now useless. All religious icons will disappear, since man will have acquired an intelligence and a consciousness that no longer requires these types of crutches. This era of intelligent man isn't for tomorrow, but it already shines on the horizon for he who looks beyond the system of his precarious thoughts. So, quite a lot that, right? I've read it about 10, 20 times and I still only get like half of it. And I think, you know, that's essentially what the Dalai Lama does, by the way, in his advanced tantric practices, is he initiates people into consciousness with the yidams. And a lot of Buddhist teachers and Buddhist masters you don't maybe know because it's not so obvious. You know, we see Buddhism as being simplicity and meditation and monastic work and silence and values and mantras and scriptures. But what we don't often hear about is that a lot of these Buddhists are actually practicing Tantra, which is what I just described there. And DK therefore is explaining how when the higher self is so far away from us in our evolution, we can call upon and initiate and attune ourselves to these Buddhist divinities and meditate with them. And what it does, it helps to represent a quality of the higher self, because the higher self can't reach us, but the divinities are so powerful, they can come in and help bridge the energy and mirror one of the 10 qualities of the higher self. And when 10 yidams are active and they're representing 10 areas that the monads can give to the human being, the gap gets closed, they disappear, and you become one with the higher self. So he's explaining an occult process behind evolving with Buddhist divinities in order to not replace yourself, but to assist you in getting to your inner self, your higher self, even quicker. That's essentially what I get that he's saying, okay? You know, and it is a bit of a shame that there's not a lot of old students, you know, on this event tonight who are listening to this material, because, you know, having so many of them studied Alice Bailey's material, I think there would be certain things in that make a lot of sense to people, right? So hopefully, you know, it'll be able to reach people if it's right and valid for them. That's all I can say. So if that blew your head off or didn't, the intention of that was just to demonstrate that kind of depth that DK usually gives in his teachings, okay? So we'll make it simpler as we go on, okay? Oh, and I'm going to read something about women, which I think is really great, okay? The impact of Ray 7 on women. So we're moving into what we would call the age of Ray 7. We're coming out of 6, which is to do with religious influence and domination, and we're moving into Ray 7. Today's woman is divided into 2 distinct energies, that of service and that which ties closely to her ego. This phenomenon produces a discomfort within her that obliges her to become increasingly more demanding towards false needs that only satisfy the superficial aspects of her life. We are here referring to the woman who is more and more subject to the energy of Ray 7. This ray allows the expression of the highest creativity in an individual, but also the most egocentric. It is the ray of freedom within form, but it can also be the ray that imprisons within form. Having always been subject to the energy of Ray 6 during its era of influence, women are now trying to free themselves from its influence, albeit in an awkward fashion. The difficulty stems from the fact that the 6th ray has made her a slave of her own self and of the needs of men, whereas the 7th ray has made her a slave of her desires tied to those of men. In the coming years, the female role will be of great importance, since she will allow humanity, through the secret that she holds within her, to make great strides towards its destiny. Nothing is easy for her. The world of illusion has opened up with all its powers and will henceforth taint her vision. In the future, women will know how to destroy these illusions by using a discernment that she will have gained from her experience and from the errors she will have committed regarding the illusory powers of a false well-being that she herself will have created. At this moment, women attract to themselves experiences that complicate their lives and that of others by increasing their desire for control of vital space in view of becoming more autonomous. Women are not meant to be autonomous in the sense that they hope to become. This autonomy is more of a masculine kind, whereas feminine autonomy goes through a different route, another expression. Women must understand themselves and expand their horizons towards the hidden face of emotions that do not now express her true needs. Having been subject for millennia to masculine domination in relation to her material needs, making her too often a slave rather than a woman. Today's woman attempts to find a place in this world by using tools that are not necessarily her own. She must develop her own power of autonomy by cultivating within herself the sense of balance of things and of both polarities. There we go. Any women like to have a comment on that? Or men?
I think that's flipping awesome. I wanted to go, hurrah! Go women. Do you know, I really resonate with that because there's a huge amount of my life is going to be better if I constantly go to the hairdressers, have my nails done, go to the shop. You know, I'm very much in that state. And yeah, I almost feel like you were reading that for me, Chris. I love that.
I was reading it
definitely
for all the women on this call. I was sending the energy to you.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great and a really good reminder just to go forget this superficiality. What does it matter? And yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. And I really got that you got it. You know, that where he's distinct about a false well-being coming from desire and materialism.
Literally today, I've been thinking about booking in to get my nails done because somehow it's going to improve my life and give me that little endorphin feel-good factor. No, that's bollocks, if I can say that.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have to edit that. I'm sure there's a lot worse online.
But you know what? That something I've felt for a long time is that it's very beautiful to see the consciously evolving woman and the beauty that she shines forth from her personality when that soul and that light starts to come through. It's a very different kind of beauty, and it is beauty. And it doesn't mean to say you don't take care of yourself, but when that inner energy is coming through, the true source of the true feminine, it brings forth a very different kind of beauty, doesn't it? And it's very powerful. You know, so okay, thank you, Verity, very much. Anybody else like to? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even remember exactly how it was you said it, but what came to my mind was like this. I feel like in my life there's been a lot of trying so hard to break free of that like shackle of being a woman and everything we've been through, that I'm almost pushing myself into a more masculine energy to do and it's not, doesn't feel so natural, whereas what I'm coming back to now is actually there's real power in doing all the things that are naturally feminine and soft. And yeah, something in what you were reading then really I can't even remember exactly what it was that you said, but it really made me think of this like yeah, I'm not expressing very well, sorry.
You're expressing brilliantly.
Yeah, just that there, it's not like we've almost been tricked into believing that we need to go this way when actually it's just coming back to the natural essence of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. And what could you tell us, like in a few points, are some of those experiences that you've had that have brought you back to that core of how would you put it, like of your own feminine self?
Gathering with other women and being with other women and doing, like, reclaiming things like being in the kitchen and, you know, like attending to a garden and all these a lot of it feels very earthy to me. And just choosing that as an expression of power, as well as, you know, it doesn't always have to be the masculine expressions of power. There's very, very powerful, like, soft expressions of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. That's great. Yeah. Thank you, Beth. Anybody else?
Yes.
Yeah, come on, Emma. You don't have to come on camera, but you can
Hi.
Hi, Em.
Yeah. I've experienced my femininity through being also having a twin brother. So there's always been an interesting relationship between the male and female polarities within me, but also in relation to how I have experienced my twin brother growing up since the womb. And so I find, like Beth, and my feminine expression expresses itself well within nature and creativity and intuition and meditation and listening and receptivity. But when you talk about the need to balance the polarities in women, it has to come with men as well, within men as well. The male and the female have to be balanced within men as well as women in order, for instance, for us to have a peaceful world. It's not just women carry a huge responsibility, but it has to happen in both sexes.
You know what? Do you know what you're bringing me to is gay men?
Yeah. Or gay women.
Yeah, or gay women, because I was told very early on the path that gay men are helping to hold the balance for the integration of the feminine energies, because having a strong female energy in a male body, you know, really does do that. And, you know, and I've been around lots of healing circles with people, you know, in South Wales, and, you know, wonderful work with medicine and healing circles and things. And not all the men, of course, but certainly a high percentage of the men, or more of a high percentage of men than what is typical for straight and gay men in society. There's a lot of gay men leading the retreats and the workshops. So I know Joel is gay, Fed is gay, and we get Matthew doing the sound bath, and then, you know, there's myself as well, and, you know, and one or two others. And I would say at least half of the men who, and sometimes even the leaders who lead with the women, are gay men. And you know, there's not half of the men in human society are gay. You know, it's a much smaller percentage than that. But we do have certainly in conscious work leading the way, quite a higher percentage of gay men, and I think that says something. You know. Anything else, Sam?
Can I just add what Emma?
Yeah, go, Gareth. Yeah.
And yourself. I think it's essential that both male and female find the balance within themselves. That's essential to the development of the human race, that we all become equally open to our feminine and masculine sides. But then when that balance, you know, we're then working more from the heart and in tune with each other than the polarities of the last 2,000 years. when women were subjugated and men were the leaders. So I agree with everything that's been said on that topic so far, but I do think that equal balance, equal poise of masculinity and femininity needs to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He does say on the very last sentence, she must develop her own power of autonomy by cultivating within herself the sense of balance of things and of polarities.
Yeah, and that should go for the male as well.
Good. Okay, cool. And the male in brackets, as everybody said. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else like to comment on that? It's a very important subject, isn't it? Given that women are really space holders for awakening and our new consciousness.
I was just put in mind of my horse, which is a very strong relationship that I have with a with a female horse. You know, when I look at her, I was thinking of her when you were talking, and she lacks self-consciousness. She's completely female and very strong, and utterly female and totally lacking in self-consciousness. There's a sort of an isness, you know, about the femininity of her, which is very strong and very present and caring, you know, and kind. And it's definitely female. It's not male. It's a female energy. And I just think that, you know, it's one of the things that's happened with materialism is that we've developed a self-consciousness about gender, which is sort of linked to the trauma of our past. You know, it's I'm male, so I'm aware of it, and you know, you're female and you're aware of it, and so on. But in reality, you know, it seems that animals are just are. They're absolutely in that energy, and I think somehow we have to get back to that. You know, we have to reconnect with that isness of our gender that we're in this incarnation, rather than the sort of self-consciousness that we're taught. But I don't know if that's helpful. But
it does. It's like the primal core of it, the isness, the primalness of it is what I think what you're saying. And animals, you know, seem to be able to really represent that, and that's powerful. Thank you. Yeah. You know, and also as the feminine's increasing, a lot of men are concerned that the masculine is losing its way somewhat as well. And there are, you know, men out there and movements that are not teaching the way of the old masculine world, but how to also embody authentic masculine energy. I've even seen great women who were space holders in the last year run courses and workshops and retreats in women cultivating authentic conscious masculine energy as well. So Emma, is that your hand up again, or have you just hit the wrong button?
No, I haven't got my hand up.
Okay, all right, cool. Unless there's anybody else who wants to add to that, if you want to speak now, or we'll move on.
I'll just
yeah, go for it.
Add a little bit more. In the West here, we're dominated by the thoughts of the Catholic and Christian Church, which has sort of elevated that separation between male and female, the roles of male and female. It hasn't always been the case. I mean, you look at a lot of societies, and women, you know, I'm talking about indigenous societies around the world, where women are the stronger element of the tribe. And you have the Gnostics, who the women and male and females were equal, even in our own Celtic church. Prior to Augustine, male and females were exactly equal. You know, women could be priests, abbesses, or whatever. It didn't really matter. So we tend to skew our modern thoughts on modern practices rather than looking at what was and hoping that we can get back to something that we've come away from. And
Brilliant.
As an equal society.
Brilliant, absolutely awesome. And quoting the Ajna Yoga teachings, which are, channeled from El Moria Khan through Helena Roerich, which Circle of Initiates do acknowledge in this material are authentic channelings. Moria says in that material something along the lines of the dark forces know what to do when they want to weaken the light of humanity. And they know that if they targeted the feminine for a reason, suppressed the feminine for a reason, because when the light of the feminine is embodied and true, the energy of the gods can be present. Yeah. Something very similar to that is in the Ajna Yoga teachings. So they know what they're doing. They've purposely done that for probably other reasons as well. And, dark holds, a purpose to it as well. So the rediscovery is sometimes very exciting, eh? So brilliant. Okay, back to the subject of initiation. So one of the things that this Circle of Initiates does is explain the 7 rays in very easy to understand ways. Okay. I will say that having studied the rays through lots of different teachers, I've yet to discover a material that is as practical in its overview of what the 7 rays are as this material. Okay. And it's fantastic. It's being done through public figures, and it's really, thanks, Sarah. It's so great just to be able to sit down and to be able to read a material that is so digestible and is able to be so tuitional at the same time without undermining the energy of the teaching and the work. Okay. Now I've chosen Donald Trump to do an overview in his ray analysis because he is so public in the world. He is so obvious in the world, whether you like him or not, or couldn't care less. He's out there, right? He's out there. He's in the press every day at some part of the world, many times. He's a very influential figure. And there is a ray interpretation given 6 years before he was president. Okay? And I am going to read this because I think it's an excellent study of the 7 rays. Okay? So Donald Trump, Master Djwahl Kuhl's commentary. Donald Trump is a very young soul who evolves in the world of finance in order to taste power. He experiments with a fragrant lack of discernment, well demonstrated through his attitude towards humans. For him, everything revolves around his fortune. He is even obsessed with it. This denotes a fairly low level of evolution for which he could not care less because he only likes the power that money provides him with. Not having any real friends, he lives a solitude that he arrogantly ignores. If his arrogant attitude does not diminish before his mental polarization begins, starting from approximately 1.5 initiation, it will become difficult for him to progress on the spiritual path. He will remain trapped in a universe where his progression will no longer take place vertically, but simply horizontally. Anyway, this holds no importance for him because he believes it is preferable to be materially rich than spiritually. On the other hand, he believes neither in spirituality nor in God. He is a man to be pitied from our viewpoint, but not from his. Initiation level 1.2. He has reached in this incarnation the height of the experience of power through what wealth can provide. He will start to live with more difficulty materially in the next incarnation. As he is dependent on money, he will live a very painful transition. Let us not forget that at this initiation level, the initiate creates much karma through carelessness and recklessness. He will consequently have to repair the errors committed since the beginning of his incarnations on this planet. Note that if we take the time to talk about it, is because he makes too many people react in the world. His worldly influence reveals itself to be colored by arrogance, contempt, lack of heart, and compassion. He is not for us an example to follow, but an example to understand. Ray structure, monad, ray 3. Soul, ray 4. Personality, 3 sub 7. Mental, 7 sub 5. Astral, 2 sub 6. Physical, 1 sub 6. Monad and soul. His monad does not exert any influence on him, and his soul very little. He is mainly influenced by the warrior and gambler traits of the energy of ray 4. As he does not have sufficient strength to master this ray, he is a bit of a victim of it, the energy of the soul being too far from him. Personality. His personality is governed by ray 3, sub ray 7 influence, makes him into an intelligent man and a manipulator. Ray 3 provides him with an ease of expressing himself in public. However, it does not confer to him a great distinction. Even if he appears distinguished, he is not. He likes to impress with his speech, loves to have the last word, and becomes furious if this is not the case. This ray provides him with the ability to work on several projects simultaneously. He very much resembles a spider in the center of its web, ready to devour anyone who comes too close to him. Subray 7 allows him to be organized, efficient, and punctual most of the time. He loves things well done and perfect. The influence of this subray instills in him the taste for beautiful things, not necessarily for those that have great class. He likes to impress and be impressed in his inferior chakras. The power of the hara, beautiful women. From the sexual chakra, strong emotions. From the solar plexus, mental body. His mental body, influenced by ray 7 sub-ray 5 energies, had little influence on him because he is uniquely focused on his physical body and his personality, his astral body being embryonic. He does not know how to really love except money, which seems to bewitch him. We would say, however, that the influence of ray 7 increases his desire for order and perfection. He shows no nuances in his desires. He wants more, to go higher and further than everyone else. Subray 5 increases his harshness towards others and sucks up every shred of compassion in him. It makes him very mundane, practical, and manipulative. Astral body. His astral body reveals little evolution. Very selfish, he rarely understands others. He detests the influence of ray 2 that sometimes makes him sensitive. He tries to remain on top of his emotions, creating the illusion that he controls them, although in fact it is the contrary. He escapes his emotions or lets them dominate him by exploding. For him, sensitivity is a threatening weakness. It can ruin him. If this were the case, he would die. His sub-ray 6 provides a devoted aspect towards his causes, especially financial ones. He thinks he loves his children. He is proud of them most of the time, but he has no idea how to treat them properly. Physical body. His physical body, impregnated with ray 1, sub-ray 6 energies, influences all of his lives and that of others. Ray 1 confers on him a resistant and tireless body. Because this ray rules the brain, hence his way of thinking, allows him to be clear, direct, and straightforward. He is rarely diplomatic, which he considers a waste of time. This ray allows him to delegate while remaining attentive to what takes place. He can detect an important detail and correct it if necessary. He shows no pity when he is entirely under the influence of Ray 1, becoming impatient, uncompromising, and demanding. He does not know how to stop because the push of this ray, over which he has no control, forces him to advance constantly without stopping. He loves power, which he uses over others, and becomes violent when he faces resistance. One has to be strong to share his life. Very selfish, he does not know how to see what happens around him, and he could not care less about it. This sub-ray 6 increases the effect of ray 1, what makes him even more demanding. If you are not on his side, he thinks you are against him. He does not like to face resistance. He thinks he is the strongest, and he believes it. Immortality, it is for him and not for others. He is convinced he will survive this life through his companies. He will die as unconscious as he was when he was born, even more. This man is not a model for humanity, even if he seems at times to have a heart. Let us wish he never goes into politics, which is not his destiny in this present life. April the 1st, 2010. There we go. Do I think he's changed since 2010? Maybe he's evolved somewhat, yeah. And he might be doing in some work, some good work at some levels, who knows? Any thoughts on that? Objections? Don't agree with it? Do agree with it? Emma?
Is the hand still up? Because I didn't have the hand up.
Well, it's up now.
Oh, do you want me to say something?
Well, Andrew, if you're not going to talk, it's fine. I think Andrew's going to say something. He just pressed the button and it went up.
Go, Andrew.
I don't want to particularly talk about that person, but it's interesting how something must have changed in humanity to have chosen him to be, the leader of America in 2016. So something must have changed. It's almost like, this, like he's given humanity something that humanity needed. It's like, it's hard to imagine. It's almost like blows your mind to imagine that we chose him, but I guess we did choose him in some level.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether there's something about the rays that have, they get their time, so we sort of needed it for some reason.
Yeah. Well, it says he's on, ray 4 warrior ray, and he has a ray 1 physical body, so that energy will. What's very interesting is that I was thinking of this the night before last. He doesn't have the initiation level to really be a very evolved and mature leader. And I think that's very obvious. Some people just see that as being rebellious, but, the way he conducts himself can be very irresponsible, and it's his way or the highway. But looking at his ray types, he does have all the ray types to be somebody that if he used the energy properly, he could make an enormous difference. The ray energies are there. Ray 1, ray 4, ray 3, ray 7. He's got the ray energies to do it. In my opinion, he just hasn't necessarily got the integration and the maturity at all levels of his being to do that properly. And that's the problem. Don't know if that helps, but, what you were saying is that, society does need rattling up. The system does need to be shaken. Will he come back into power again? Maybe he will. Has he learned some things? Hopefully, if he does. I want to keep my opinion too much out of this talk because that's not what it's about. But it is very interesting, to see, somebody who studied the rays and to see how he talks about ray 7, and how it creates order and perfection. And, ray 3 is the relay of working on many things at once, but it's also the ray of can be the ray of the manipulator. And, Ray 1, when he was on stage with Hillary Clinton in the election conversations in the United States, she felt that he was just like a bully that would charge across the stage and, stand over and try and force her into submission. That the Ray 1 energy can be like that. It can cross boundaries, charge at you like a bull, and takes no prisoners and can be very dominating. That's the nature. That can be the Ray 1 when it's not controlled properly on the physical body or another part of the structure. Yeah, and I think people who resonate with his Ray energies, that Ray 4, that warrior, is a very deep energy for humanity. They might resonate with his rays, actually, people who support him as well. That's something to think about.
Chris, I don't want to get into
Yeah.
politics of it, but I think, because each side of the Atlantic, we had this divisive figure, Trump and mini Trump sort of thing. I think it's a time when politics needed to be shaken up, and I think people from that point on don't look at and so fixed in their political views. We saw, you see a lot of changes in politics, in the way people think, the way people, and also American politics as well as British politics. It's so money orientated now. You have to, I think there's something like £1 billion spent to put a president in place.
Yeah.
It's not open to the average man. And Trump certainly didn't spend his own money. I mean, it's the people that back him that put the money up.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Johnson. Johnson, it's the people who, any political leader these days, it's the people who back them that put the money there. And it's quite often just the newspapers. They're the people with the power and the money to do it.
Yeah.
Or the
Absolutely.
chemical companies, or the bio companies, whatever it is. It's the money. It's the money that puts the people in power, not necessarily the people. Because you can make people think whatever you want if you put the right information out there, or the wrong information.
Yeah.
I think it's the time in this evolution of human consciousness that politics needs to change, and that is what's happening because of those two individuals.
Yeah, it's like the polarity of it can really allow people to think in a very different way, can't it, and shake things up. Yeah, absolutely great. Yeah, thank you. Anything else from anybody about that segment? You can say what you want, but you don't have to fit with what I've said, or what the passage says.
Chris, Holly Bush is
Barb. Sorry, I haven't got much on my screen here because I'm managing a few different portals. Did you want to say something, Barb?
She needs to switch her mic on.
Let me see if I can get the mic on for her. I might be able to do that. Holly Bush. Right. Oh, no, I can't do that. Yeah, but Barb, I can't get you on because you can't unmute somebody else. Okay, sorry. Okay, you can come back in when you found how to unmute yourself. Okay, so I'm going to read some stuff about Barack Obama, and this isn't a bias. I'm not doing this to be biased. I'm doing it just to demonstrate something important, because a lot of people out there put Trump on a pedestal as if he's going to command and wield some very high force. Yeah, what are his oppositions in for? I don't know, because his oppositions aren't in this material here. But I'm just going to read a bit about Obama, because it's an important NMNOP. There's an esoteric distinction that I'm going to attempt to make. Okay, all right. So a man of great intelligence and great simplicity, Mr. Obama is a noble-hearted being who knows how to demonstrate intelligence in his approaches. Neither a fanatic nor a dictator, he is dedicated to his people's well-being. That is the people living in the United States, regardless of race, as well as to world peace. One may qualify him as an idealist, but isn't the contribution of idealists necessary for the planet and the whole of humanity to be well? Suffering, whatever its nature, disconcerts him and is painful for him. His weak point remains women. He discovers his vulnerable side when he faces their charm and beauty, a frailty caused by his Ray 7 soul. He likes perfection, order, and equity in everything. He knows how to behave when faced by the seduction exercised by women who like power and who would do anything to get closer to it. A disciple of El Moria Khan, although he is presently under the direction of the Count Saint-Germain, he is a born politician. Ray 7 remains necessary for his first lives in politics. He will dedicate several incarnations to politics, will learn how to manage it so that it does not destroy his own life. He will have to cultivate caution and at times moderation, which Ray 7 will grant him. When he will have accomplished a complete circle of 7 lives in politics, he is in his third. He will be able to use the energy of his real master linked to the ashram of Ray 1. Initiation level 2.3. He will undoubtedly reach the initiation level of 2.5 in the present incarnation. If he lives long enough, his ideas could disturb and endanger his life. He has to learn caution, which is essential in this incarnation. Right. So the distinction I want to make here is in Alice Bailey's teachings, when DK talks about initiation levels and evolution, he says, we have the 3 major rays, 1, 2, and 3, and we have the 4 sub-rays, the rays of attributes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Obama's on the 7th ray, currently on his soul. When you get to the 3rd initiation, he's on 2.3 when that material was written at the start of his presidency, 2.3. When you get to the 3rd initiation, you have to start shifting to a ray of attribute, on a ray of aspect on the soul, 1, 2, or 3. So if you're on 4, 5, or 6, after you've passed the 3rd initiation, you then have to start transitioning to 1, 2, or 3. And we're given this in Alice Bailey's materials, right? And he says here that when he reaches his 3rd initiation, if his cycle of 7 incarnations in politics is finished, he will be able to choose a soul under the influence of Ray 1. His work would then take on a larger scope and he would become an important ally of El Moria Khan's ashram. So who's El Moria Khan? El Moria Khan is the master who basically oversees government, statespeople, also esoteric schools, but he largely is involved in steering nations, working with governments, and in between lives and on the astral planes when people go to sleep and things, he's working with people to try and steer society and government in the right direction. That's one of the main things that he does. Now, if Obama is gonna have a cycle of 7 lives in politics, and he's in his 3rd. If when he's finished 7, he has done the 3rd initiation, he's currently at 2.3, he will then and only then be able to choose a soul under the energy of Ray 1 and will and power, and distribute the force of that energy coming from El Moria Khan's ashram, and be a very, very, very influential person within politics that can break up old systems and help human living to evolve. He's not at that level yet. Donald Trump is at 1.2, and he's saying that he hasn't yet reached the mental plane, and even his astral body is still in an embryonic stage. If that teaching is correct, there is no hope in hell of Donald Trump wielding the power of a higher force coming from an ashram in his lifetime. I can tell you that right now. So this fantasy that Donald Trump is going to save the world through working with a higher power, according to this esoteric work, that ain't going to happen. He's not at that level where he can do that. It could be 5-10 lifetimes down the road to do that. I don't know if that is quite complicated, or if it makes sense, but I just want to make that distinction, because he's not going to be accessing some higher force that's going to change the world. Will he impact things if he becomes president again? Maybe he might do. Will he shake things up? Maybe he might do. Will he change things and stop things? Maybe he might do. But whether he's going to do that in tandem with a higher power coming through him, very, 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 very unlikely. You know, it's saying that Obama has got 4 lifetimes to go, and he's doubled the initiation level, and he's also a disciple of the masters, and he's not ready to do that yet. So I hope that adds some clarification if you think it does.
Chris, can I come in there as well?
Yeah.
I think, as you say, Trump has got several first-rate influences there. Obama said after he finished his presidency that he couldn't get done everything he wanted to be done because of the powers that be. He just felt like a puppet sat on the end of a string, and he was the face of what was going on, and his own influences weren't able to come to the fore. If we go back to Trump and his, and this political nuance that's happening over the last, 5-10 years, where people are starting to understand that politicians are after themselves and not they're not looking on the whole that they're the people they're supposed to represent, but it's the money that's guiding them and not the voters. Then if in the next 10 years that changes, that people change the political system, and Obama comes back in then with his ray energy of a 3 or above, then real change could happen. And the same with Trump. If Trump changes it, with his incarnations, if he changed and came back in, then real change could happen there. But it's like if you look at numerology and you look at the Second World War, how many high numerology people were in power at that time?
Yeah.
Churchill, both the Eisenhowers were very high on the numerology. In fact, Eleanor was higher than
Roosevelt.
She was higher than he was as far as numerology is concerned. Hitler was even high on high numerology. So they were all coming in to make change, and Second World War did change things for people.
A lot of things, yeah.
So it's just the right people, the right circumstances, the right time.
Yeah, there is the Roosevelts are studied in here. Franklin Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt, and was it Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt's?
Franklin.
Yeah, Franklin. I think he was a 2.4 or something, and Theodore was a 2.8. Nelson Mandela, 3.3 initiation, 3rd level initiate. Mikhail Gorbachev was a 3rd level initiate as well. There's not been many in politics that are 3rd level initiates. Justin Trudeau, who's the president of Canada, his father was a 3rd level initiate. Nelson Mandela and Gorbachev, and that's about it as far as the presidents have been. You get a lot of them around 2s. Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, stuff like that. They're 2s and high 2s and things, but they're often used by higher forces for some reason, and not necessarily the master. Sometimes necessarily the master themselves, which is an interesting thing. People would have thought Gandhi was a very high initiation level, and he's actually only something like a 2.3 or 2.4, because he was working with the Mahatmas. He wasn't the Mahatma working with the Mahatmas. This book points towards, yeah. But there's a study in here of Osho, the spiritual teacher Osho, who is also a third level initiate, who DK says he's in a lifetime which is preparational to become a true and authentic master in his next life. But he said, just because his students were opening up to new spiritual knowledge and light, it doesn't mean to say they were becoming very evolved. And he points out that some of his students were actually struggled to grow more than 1 or 2 decimal points. So it's not like they went from an entire initiation level to the next initiation. That can happen. They actually struggled to just take 1 point, 1 sub point. And if Donald Trump is like 1.2, he might be a bit more evolved than that now, because that was 10 years ago. Is he really going to jump that further? Are these people going to jump that much further ahead to really carry some more energy? Who knows? It's like you don't have to be a high initiation level to get your ego together, because Neil Donald Walsh is only a 1.2, 1.3, which is about the same initiation level as Trump, and he does very influential spiritual work, as we discussed, for people on the path. So if the ego gets itself together, it can become a conduit, but whether it will or not is another thing. So there are 109 people in this book. It's so fascinating. There is so much value. There are tidbits of incredible information throughout. There's really quickly, I'll read who's in here rather than go through anybody else. Okay, so we've got Jane Addams, Ashoka, Johann Sebastian Bach, Alice Bailey, Ludwig van Beethoven, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Andre Brother, Anton Bruckner, George W. Bush, Jim Carrey, Carlos Castaneda, Fidel Castro, Nikolai Korsakov, Mantak Chia, Anai Pema Chodron, Trungpa Rinpoche Chogyam, Deepak Chopra, Agatha Christie, Winston Churchill, Hillary Clinton, Andrew Cohen, Benjamin Creme, Oliver Cromwell, Tom Cruise, Marie Curie, Leonardo da Vinci. Oh my God, I'm only about 30 of them through, but there's a lot of them in here. And there's a second book underway. And like Gareth and I are practically like foaming at the mouth, because Mother Mary's in here, Mary Magdalene, St. John the Baptist, Jesus, Paramahansa Yogananda, Eckhart Tolle, John F. Kennedy, Helen Keller, Krishnamurti. There's going to be an overview, an initiation, determination when they died, and their race structure. So that's very exciting.
That's in the next book, not in this.
Yeah, in the next book. Yeah, in the next book. So Gareth, you've read this material and you've been very much involved in the arcane knowledge. Do you want to say a bit about your experience and your history with the ancient wisdom, and then what you think about this material?
Okay. Well, like Chris, I've been studying this a fair while, a bit longer than Chris probably.
Yeah.
Since I'm a lot older. Yeah, I've worked with DK. I know I work with DK. I don't do anything, and like this sort of writing, but he does. I'm a trance medium and transfiguration medium. So DK's face comes over my face when I work with him. He sometimes sends me off to his gardening if he doesn't want me listening to what's being said. So I know I work with him as well as 1 or 2 other masters. And when Chris suggested I read this book, after following Blavatsky and Bailey, studying at university, I studied the Indian religions. After reading Claire D Roy's books, there's a definite influence of DK in there. He's even said to me that it is his work, so I know it is his work. And it is fascinating that circle of initiates. I can't wait for the next volume to come out, because you just think, well, all these people who've influenced you over your lifetime, and who've written so much. We've seen, you can do your own ray analysis on these people, but it's not until the master of the ray analysis does the analysis that you realize how little we really know about the subject, really. And these people that we look up to, like Deepak Chopra, I mean, you'd imagine him being quite high level in this shit. He's not, I can't remember what he is, but he's below 2, I think. And it's very revealing, very refreshing. And I think, as with world teachers, I've got this rule that world teachers come around every 600 years, basically. Real world teachers, like the Buddha, 600 years BCE, Christ on around the 0 point, and you had Muhammad at 600 AD. If you look at Helena Blavatsky, Bailey, and Klaire D Roy, there's about 60 years between them. So is there a pattern? Is there a pattern of his teaching coming out? And DK is known as the master's master. He works for them all and with them all. And his information that he puts up is absolutely fantastic. Fantastic. And I count this work within that. I haven't read all the stuff, I've got to admit, because I got piles of books, and my wife refuses to let me buy any more until I read those.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Thanks, Gareth. And I just was left with, I should have organised this talk with you. Because I love it when you share. I absolutely love it. Yeah, so any questions from anybody? Any observations, any feedback, anything that's there for you around anything at all?
I have a couple of questions.
Go for it.
So super interesting. Loved it. Love all of it. So I'm obviously very new to this. And as you know, I'm an astrologer. And I know that you've talked about how it's linked to astrology. And I just wonder, like, if we have time, if you could just say a bit about that.
Sure.
And then also, like, I'm interested in, like, obviously we've looked today at this book and how it really breaks down what the rays look like when they show up in in a person, and how it all works. And I'm also just interested in, like, I would like to learn more, but I'd also like to kind of understand maybe how this would relate to my life,
Yeah,
and like how
sure.
I use it to help people, or to, I don't know. Yeah, just wondering.
No, it's great. Well, that's what it's really about. And a lot of that can come from studying the material, because it does explain it there. But it's always good to have buddies and study groups. Gareth and I have taught a course on the rays, and we're going to teach another course. We're just looking at dates when we're going to do that, which will build upon what we've done, because you learn so much more, not just in terms of knowledge, but more in terms of the needs and how things can be applied practically and in the real world. Because knowledge in itself comes from certain rays, whereas certain rays are not knowledge rays. They're more like being artist work, the methods of doing things themselves. So it's like learning about the rays through the application of them versus just talking and explaining and giving people knowledge. It's more of an embodiment and a process is what we're going to be looking at. Or that's what I said we're going to be looking at. I haven't discussed that part with Gareth yet. But as far as astrology is concerned, this is a question that I had. I couldn't get how the rays in astrology work 10 more than 10 years ago. But you have the 7 rays. Ray 1 of will and power, the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer of all forms of existence, that essentially in its higher form brings everything back to God in evolution slowly and progressively, destroys crystallized states of existence. Can be very harsh and very ruthless, but it's also a force that short-term pain for long-term gain is very briefly. The second ray is the ray of unity, love and wisdom. And it's, many of the humanitarians, the teachers, the philosophers, the uniters of the world, the loving people, the nurturers are on the second ray. The third ray is intelligence. It rules business, adaptability, the ability to work on many things at once. It's the ray of planet Earth itself. It's the third ray. The fourth ray is the arts and, music and artistry and all kinds of forms of art. It's also the ray of the warrior. Music, primarily the fourth ray. And it's the energy that brings us from deep inner conflict and working through lots of deep emotional stuff into a greater harmony of ourselves. A very brief way of putting it. The fifth is science, the concrete, linear, scientific analysis, the grounded, the kind of practical, linear, like everything must be proven by science, and the ability to do that, and engineering and the sciences is the fifth ray. And the sixth ray is the ideologies and religion, which has been very much in manifestation the last 2,000 years with Islam and Christianity, and how we've had a world, even with governments, that's been run by religion. So that's the sixth ray. It's devotion and ideologies. And the seventh ray, which you've got a lot of, is ceremonial, order, ritual, and magic. Order, perfection, attention to detail, which allows ultimately for an environment of magic to be created in any area of life. So very simple way of putting it. Now, the first ray works through the mythical planet Vulcan and through Pluto.
Okay.
The second ray works through Jupiter and the Sun. The third ray is Earth and Saturn. The fourth ray is the Moon and Mercury and Pluto. The fifth ray is Venus, primarily. Okay. Yeah. There's the sixth ray is Mars and Neptune. Mars in its lower form, Neptune in its higher. Okay. And the seventh ray is Uranus, primarily. And that's the rays.
And this is esoteric astrology.
It is, yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, all right. I'd be really interested to learn more about that. But yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. And I'm glad you asked that, because that's the bit that I love, is the astrology and the rays.
Yeah, no, really cool.
That's a very good I don't want to use, orthodox, but real world astrologer. Like Beth and I, are going to start doing some stuff together with astrology. And Beth is so good at making crystal clear, complex subjects and making them real and grounded so people can get them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think me and you are the perfect complement. We're like crackers and cheese with astrology, because you bring all the esoteric in, and yeah, it's a good.
You bring the real world and the practical and making sense for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Yeah, look forward to it. Thanks, Beth. Okay. Anything from anybody else? Any questions or observations or critical feedback even, or I don't like that. That's not what I agree with. That's okay too.
Right, so Mary again. I think it's a great course, Chris. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all your work that is involved in putting this together, and your sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Thank you. And it was a pleasure to do it. And I will say that this has been one of my passions, doing this. I really enjoyed creating the slide deck today, and really putting it all together and, organizing the event. And it's really taken me through a dark night of the soul, having to put this out in the world, because it was originally created as an event to have old students be introduced to potentially DK's material. And that's not what came out of it. And what's come out of it is potentially a lot of new people being exposed and being introduced to DK's work, which is essentially why I think he created these ray volumes in the first place, because you know, the old students out there, a lot of them understand the rays. They're teaching the rays, and this work isn't any different. There's a few clarifications and a few adjustments that he's made in how to understand it, things that people were a bit off with. But there are some remarkable synergies between his ray interpretations and the ray interpretations of really good teachers who have been doing this for decades. So it's no different. It's just coming straight from source and making very practical and very simple in layman's terms the psychology of the rays and initiations, which DK very much wants to be in the world. So, you know, thank you for all being here. And if there's anything else from anybody, you know, speak now, or we'll finish up the meeting.
Just to say thank you, Chris. Really, really enjoyable, and I feel the authenticity of the material coming through you. So thank you
very much. Thank you. Yeah,
much appreciated.
You're very welcome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and great to hear you down, you know, with the Theosophical Lodge as well, down in Worthing. There we go.
You're all very welcome if you ever want to come along.
Well, I'll be visiting certainly in 2024. My friends down in Worthing, they live on the waterfront, so I'll get in touch with you when I'm going to do that, if I don't hear from you, or vice versa before then.
Yeah, please do. We'd be delighted.
Okay, thank you everybody for your time. I hope it was valuable. Any questions, considerations, anything you want to throw at me, please get in touch. Love to you all, and if there's not anything else, then have a wonderful evening and see you soon. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.
You are very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, just stopping